we're starting to see patients that live long enough to die of something else. The clinical trials I run for melanoma patients, some of them have died of other things.
G'day, and welcome to Wellbeing. I'm Jack Hodgins. Today we are talking with Professor Nikola Bowden from the University of Newcastle about cancer. Professor Bowden is an award-winning molecular biologist with a special interest in melanoma and ovary cancers. Her research is giving existing cancer drugs new life by combining them in unconventional ways, and these experiments are showing exciting results. In this episode, I discuss with Professor Bowden what cancer is, the challenges in finding a cure, and the exciting new research happening in the field right now. Hello Nicola, and welcome to Wellbeing.
Oh, thank you for having me.
What is cancer?
Oh, that's a good question. Cancer is when normal cells in your body change, or we call transform, and start to grow out of control and don't stop growing.
Why does it occur?
We don't know, actually. Some cancers are caused by environmental impacts, so things like lung cancer that is caused by smoking and asbestos. We have skin cancer that's caused by sun damage, but many cancers we don't know what causes it.
Do cancer cells start off as normal cells?
Yes, they always start off as normal cells, and for most of them we can tell what the normal cell was that this cancer started to grow from.
What is different about a cancer cell than a normal cell?
The main difference is that normal cells either grow and then die, so things like our hair follicles and skin and lots of the cells in our body turn over, we call it, so they divide and then they die and then new cells divide again. But with cancer, they tend to rapidly divide and grow very quickly, and they don't die. So that's what happens when a tumour starts to grow. The cells just multiply and multiply, but they don't tend to die off.
So are all cancers tumours of some sort?
Yes, yep. So we have, for the word tumour, we have a malignant tumour, which is a cancer that continues to grow out of control, and we have benign tumours, which are just a growth that usually we can remove surgically and won't spread throughout the body.
What types of cancers are there?
Lots. So basically, every single cell in your body has the potential to start growing as a cancer. So we do tend to group them by anatomical location or where that cell was growing in the body. So we have skin cancer, brain cancer, bone cancer, lung cancer, that kind of thing. So basically, every single cell in your body has the potential to be a cancer cell.
What are some of the environmental factors that could possibly cause cancer?
Number one for us is still sun exposure. So getting sunburnt, particularly getting sunburnt, like a blistering sunburn as a child, is a really high risk factor. The sun actually damages the DNA in our skin cells, which means they can turn into cancer later in life. The other ones are cigarette smoking, of course, and asbestos for lung cancer. Then there's other things that we're starting to look more closely at. So obesity is actually a really high risk factor for developing a lot of different types of cancers, and is obviously now impacting on our society a lot more than it used to. They're the main things that are the highest risk factors.
You mentioned the sun there and its effect on us. How does the sun affect us in a way that can make us develop cancer?
So this is actually one of my areas of great passion and expertise. I've done a lot of work in melanoma research and how the sun damages our skin to predispose it to growing into a cancer. Basically what happens is the UV light or the UV rays that come from the sun can penetrate through our skin and can get into the DNA, and it damages the DNA. And if you have enough of that damage that accumulates over time, it changes the DNA, which is the instructions for the skin cells, and they start to grow out of control and they don't die. So that's how a tumour starts, as opposed to normal skin that hasn't had as much DNA damage and turns over. So it dies off and your new skin regenerates, and you don't have that out-of-control growth that we see happen with melanoma and other skin cancers.
How can obesity affect someone in a way in which can allow them to get cancer?
That's a good question. A lot of it we don't know yet.
Okay.
But obesity is very closely linked to hormone regulation. So for a lot of hormone-driven cancers, there's a relationship there between having obesity and dysregulated hormone levels. So we see there's the other area I work in is ovarian cancer. So we see a lot of ovarian and gynecological cancers and breast cancers associated with obesity, but particularly the ovarian and endometrial cancers, which is linked to changes in hormones. A lot of it we don't really understand yet, and there's actually work happening in Newcastle in some of the research groups here to try and figure out what that link is. So we know it statistically at the moment, but we don't know the biology really behind a lot of it.
You mentioned the hormones there. What is the connection between cancer and hormones?
So some of our cancers, we know a lot about breast cancer. It's had a lot of research for a very long time and obviously had a lot of funding and a lot of focus on it. And it's one of the most, the highest incidence that we have of cancers in Australia. But with breast cancer, we know that there's progesterone and estrogen receptors that are expressed by the tumour. And so having lots of exposure to estrogen and progesterone can drive particular types of breast cancer. We know that really well, and we're starting to look at that in other contexts as well, so with endometrial and ovarian cancer. So we do know. So the tumours actually, when a patient has their breast cancer removed, they're actually screened to see if they have estrogen and progesterone receptors.
What are the most common types of cancer in Australia?
Lung cancer has a very high incidence, and breast cancer. And then if we base it off the population of Australia compared to other countries, we still have a very, very high incidence of melanoma and the other two types of skin cancer, which is squamous cell and basal cell carcinoma. Melanoma is the most deadly of the three, but we still have a really high incidence of those three.
What can cancer do to the body? Like, when someone gets cancer, how do they feel?
Early on, depending on the type of cancer, so some cancers are really visible very early. So for skin cancer, it's on the surface of your skin. You can see it. You can see changes in a spot on your skin. For other cancers, so things like ovarian cancer and pancreatic cancer, the people who have that disease don't actually know they've got it until it's very advanced and they have lots of cancer growing, and they don't know until it actually starts to cause pain or discomfort. And so the ones that are visible are usually easy to detect and curable in most cases. But ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer, sometimes lung cancer, very hard to detect because they have to grow a lot before you know you have it.
Why does cancer exist?
Good question. I don't think we actually know. It probably over the history of time, it was probably a way to help with keeping populations under control. So if you don't, everybody has to die of something. Animals, humans, everyone, we have to die of something. And it was probably the cause of early death for a long time before we realised that cancer existed and had treatments for it. And there's some really interesting historical stories of artworks where you can see that the person that in the painting actually has a lump in their breast or has a skin cancer that the artist painted from hundreds of years ago. So we know it's been around, but we don't know why we get it. It's just devastating when somebody does get diagnosed with it.
So it's been across history. It's been here since the beginning of time, basically. Yeah. And there's a lot of very old anecdotal stories of even within families. You hear of a great-great-grandmother who died of a growth or had severe abdominal pain and died of that, which probably was some kind of cancer but couldn't be diagnosed 150 years ago. So looking back, there's a lot of medical historians who have looked at the history of cancer and going back in time and seeing, it actually was documented. We just didn't know what it was back then. So could we frame it as something that naturally occurs in the human condition? Is that?
Yep, absolutely. So the very large majority of cancers just happen and we don't know why. We have no idea why that particular person got that particular cancer.
How many cases would you say of cancer would be down to lifestyle factors?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. I don't know. I guess to give the context of why I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, we tend to put all of the cancers into we categorise them by the location that they're from. So, I'm an expert in melanoma and ovarian cancer, so that's where I know all the details. Yep. But because I think cancer is a term for a lot of diseases they are quite different and treated very differently. So even melanoma and ovarian cancer are two very, very different diseases, diagnosed very differently, occur in very different populations of people. So it's kind of, I think, mainly the reason I can't answer it is because cancer's a name for a lot of different diseases all lumped together. Yeah.
Can it run in the family?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Definitely can. And there is familial cancer syndromes, we call them. So breast cancer is the best categorised for that. So there's two breast cancer genes that can be passed on from generation to generation. And they tend to be appearing in patients who have breast cancer at a very young age and have a very strong family history. So they've had mothers and aunties and grandmothers who have also had breast cancer at a young age. So that one's easier for us to study. There's also some colorectal cancer syndromes as well, and a few other really rare ones.
You're listening to Wellbeing, a nationally distributed radio show and podcast. My guest today is Professor Nikola Bowden from the University of Newcastle, where we are discussing cancer. Are we able to identify cancer in genetic data like DNA?
Not really, no. So at the moment there's a lot of people who will send a DNA sample away and get it assessed, thinking that they're going to get back an answer whether or not they have cancer or they're going to get cancer. Really, there's only those genes like the breast cancer genes and the colorectal cancer genes, and there's a few very rare other genes for familial cancer. But usually you would know from your family history that that you're at very high risk. It's very unlikely that looking at your DNA is going to tell you out of that context of having a family history that you are going to get cancer.
Are there any demographics that are most at risk of getting cancer?
Not more so. We do see it a lot more. So there's a lot higher incidence of cancer in older people, and that's where a lot of the lifestyle type cancers start to appear as well. So, from many, many years of sun exposure, people develop melanomas in their 60s and 70s and 80s. And it's the same with lung cancer and some other, exposure cancers like that. We also are living a lot longer than we used to, so people are living to a much older age. So they've got more time to develop a cancer if they're older. When, 100 years ago, everybody died at a much younger age. They didn't actually live long enough to develop a cancer. So we do see an increased incidence in older people now. But we also are at the same time reducing the incidence by doing all of our sun safety campaigns. The drop in cigarette smoking has been very rapid over the last couple of decades. We don't use asbestos anymore, so we don't see those mesothelioma type cancers. And we detect cancer a lot earlier than we used to. So if you can detect it earlier, you can cure it more easily.
How do cigarettes cause cancer?
That's a good question. You've got great questions.
Thank you.
It's not too dissimilar from the sun exposure. So it's the toxins that are in the cigarettes that cause damage to the cells and to the DNA within the cells in the lungs. And over time that accumulates and then starts to the cells start to grow out of control. And we've seen it. There are other chemical exposures that can cause the same thing, but cigarettes obviously were much more common for a very long time too.
How prevalent is cancer?
Yeah, that's also a good question. See, I know those sort of statistics, for melanoma and ovarian cancer, but in general, I actually don't know, like, if you lump them all together, what the chance is that a person will get some kind of cancer in their life. I actually don't know those numbers. I don't know if anyone does, to be honest.
Okay.
Now I need to go and do some research after talking to you.
Say someone my age. So I'm 18 at the moment. What's those statistics going to look like for my generation? Are we going to see better statistics in terms of cancer, or are we going to get better at that?
Yeah. I think rather than measuring the statistics in how many people are diagnosed with cancer, I think we are starting to move to a reporting system where we actually talk about how many people survive cancer. So we have so many really, really high resolution and highly accurate ways of detecting cancer now that we pick up a lot more than we used to. But we also have way better treatments and surgeries and things. So you can be diagnosed with a cancer today, have surgery and be cured for the rest of your life.
Okay.
But you're a statistic, you've had cancer. So I think we will move towards where we talk more in terms of patients that die of cancer rather than diagnosed with it. Or, we're talking now too about patients living with cancer for the rest of their lives, so it becomes a chronic condition. So I think it'll be similar to having diabetes or, high blood pressure where you take a medication for the rest of your life. We are moving towards that. So if you have a cancer, you have to take a medication for the rest of your life, but you can live a happy, healthy life as long as you take your tablets. So that's where we're heading as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
How preventable overall is cancer?
Some of the really common ones, like I keep talking about, the skin cancer and lung cancer, you can do a lot to protect, to, I guess, minimise your risk. So it's a bit like, we describe it the same as driving a car. You can drive your car everywhere without a seatbelt on, and your chance of having an accident and dying are much higher than if you wear your seatbelt. Same thing with wearing sunscreen. If you go and sunbake all day without sunscreen on, you increase your chance of getting a melanoma. But if you wear your sunscreen, you've reduced that risk significantly. So there's things we can do that are safety measures similar to, driving a car, wearing a helmet when you ride a bike, those sort of things. Yeah. We can't say for sure that it will protect you forever, but it reduces the risk significantly.
Are young people at risk of cancer?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but there is a variety of cancers that appear in young people. We see a lot of leukemias and brain cancer in particular, but the incidences are not as high as they are for adult cancers. I think the greatest risk for young people is ignoring those things that you can do to protect yourself. So young people tend to sunbake because they go through a stage of being a little kid where your parents make you wear sunscreen and make you wear a hat. And then as a young adult, you don't have to do that anymore. It's back on you. And and lots of people fall into the habit of not wearing sunscreen, not wearing a hat, not protecting themselves from the sun. Many smoke cigarettes, and now vaping is really common as well, and we don't really know the risks of vaping yet on increasing lung cancer. So that's another area that's going to develop over the next few years to see what happens in all the people that are vaping and lung cancer as we progress. Yeah, so it's more, I guess, and it's kind of the same as the rest of how you live your life as a young person. You take risks. But sometimes later in life you realise you shouldn't have taken those risks because you have to live with the consequences later.
What is the process into removing a tumour?
It varies. So for, obviously ones that you can see, so skin cancers and things, it's done by there's surgeons that are specialty oncology surgeons, but they will remove the tumour. They usually take some normal healthy tissue from around the tumour as well, because we call it a margin, so to make sure that we get it all and take it all out, we take some healthy tissue from around it. So that's pretty straightforward for skin cancer, but then when you have other cancers, so you can't really remove a whole organ that you need. So if you have brain cancer, you can't have your entire brain taken out. The surgery is a lot more complex, and sometimes surgery is not an option and it can't be done, but vast majority of the tumours do have a surgical procedure that can happen for them, which sometimes is completely cures. Sometimes it reduces the amount of cancer and there still needs to be further treatment. Sometimes it doesn't help. So, yeah.
Where does radiation, like chemo, kind of sit within that?
Yeah, so for cancers that have both surgery and chemo or radiation, the patient will go in, have surgery, have as much of the tumour removed as possible, and then go into a treatment regime of either chemotherapy or radiation, sometimes both, depending on the type of cancer they have. And so what the job of the chemotherapy and the radiation is to kill off any other cancer cells that have been left behind. So even if a surgeon cannot physically see any tumour left behind, sometimes it only takes one or two cells for that tumour to grow back again. So the radiation and most chemotherapies actually cause a huge amount of damage to the DNA in the cancer cells, and then they die. So it sort of reverses that situation where the cells grow out of control. It kills them off rapidly. But as everybody knows, there's lots of terrible side effects to having chemotherapy because the chemotherapy doesn't know which cells are cancer and which ones are your normal cells. It kills off other cells that grow, like your hair follicles and the lining of your stomach and, things that cause you to lose hair and vomit and be very sick. So chemotherapy is awful because of the side effects, and radiation, similar, it kills off a lot of the healthy cells around where the tumour was.
Why don't we yet have a cure for cancer?
I think that comes back to my explanation that cancer's lots and lots of diseases lumped into one title. We do have cures for some types of cancer. So some cancers are completely cured by just having surgery, having the tumour removed. Others are completely cured by chemotherapy or radiation therapy. So I think we can absolutely say some cancers are curable, completely curable. It's the ones that we can't cure that we keep striving to find that cure for cancer, as we call it. Yeah. So I think we are heading towards the point in time though where we change the way we talk about cancer, and we won't be looking for a cure. We'll be looking for a nicer treatment, so something that's not chemotherapy, something that you can take every day and won't make your hair fall out and won't make you sick and vomiting every day, but you can take it and live the rest of your life with the cancer still, with you, but not growing and not making you sick.
What are some of those types of cancers that we haven't yet really gotten a cure for, rather?
Absolutely, ovarian cancer, which is now my focus and my team's focus. The treatments haven't even changed for it for the last 60 or 70 years. We just have made no progress at all with treating ovarian cancer. Pancreatic cancer is another that's very, very difficult to treat and very difficult to make progress on. And I think the other one that's still devastating is brain cancer. So the severe types of brain cancer also are very, very difficult to treat, tend to come back and make patients sick very quickly.
You're listening to Wellbeing, a nationally distributed radio show and podcast. My guest today is Professor Nikola Bowden from the University of Newcastle, where we are discussing cancer. Why is it hard in those particular types of cancers to find a cure or to find better ways of managing it?
I think it's a combination of things. So the location of those tumours makes them very hard to access for surgery, very hard to treat. Even with radiation, they are treated with surgery and radiation, but very hard to get all of the tumour out. The other thing that really hampers their progress is that they're not common cancers, so there's not a lot of people with them, so they don't receive as much attention as the more common cancers, and they don't receive as much attention even from drug companies developing new drugs. They will develop a drug that's going to be used by lots and lots and lots of people over a drug that's only going to be used by a small percentage of people. So I think it's a combination of they're very hard to access and very hard to study and very low incidence. So they really didn't get as much attention as the more common cancers.
We talked a little bit about chemo and cutting out tumours. What are some innovative ways in how we can cure cancer, or we can, cut it out better, or, what are some innovative ways in the field at the moment?
So one of the coolest, I'm going to say coolest, even though I'm an old person, I can say things are cool. One of the best things we have seen in the last 10 years is that a lot of the new treatments that we use now are called immunotherapy. So rather than targeting the cancer cells and trying to kill them, we actually target the patient's own immune system, get it to attack the tumours. So similar to if you have, an infection or something, if you get a splinter in your finger and it blows up into a big, infection, your immune system's attacking it. That's what we're doing. We're trying to get the tumour to be recognised as a foreign body that shouldn't be inside you, and your own immune system attacks it. So for melanoma, that was a game changer that we've got 2 drugs now that target the tumour and the immune system and how they talk to each other, so that the immune system will just attack the tumour and they literally disappear within days. It's amazing. Okay. Yeah, I've seen some of the most amazing scans of patients who have melanoma tumours all over their whole body, and then within the first sort of 6 weeks of treatment, they're completely gone.
How expensive is cancer research?
Yeah, ridiculously expensive. Depending on what you do, I guess. So I do a lot of very heavy lab-based research where we actually do something called drug repurposing, where we look at all the drugs we already have for every disease and see if any of them will work to treat ovarian cancer. It's expensive because it's lots of drugs and lots of time to screen. So that end of it's expensive because it's very time-consuming to maybe get one drug that might work out of that. The other end of the spectrum is running clinical trials for new drugs, and that also is incredibly expensive, and it's heavily regulated and takes anywhere. So our trials at the moment, we recruit between 20 and 40 patients, and that costs about $1 million.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's very labour intensive. Most of that is paying the clinical trial staff to make sure it's run safely. So it's really expensive, and we spend most of our time applying for funding to pay for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We hear so much money, billions of dollars going into cancer research. Are we making progress? Are we doing really well?
I think so, absolutely. Like I was saying before, some cancers are completely cured now, and that was not the case, even 20 years ago. So, the survival rate for breast cancer in particular is really high now. Most people who are diagnosed with breast cancer survive, and that's purely from the millions and millions of dollars that have been put into breast cancer research and understanding it better than we do any other type of cancer. And it's really similar to all of the work that pivoted and started working on COVID over the last 2 years. Every government piled billions of dollars into COVID research, and so we had a vaccine very quickly, and we have treatments now that are starting to come out as well, which, had that have happened for cancers, we would have amazing results. Yeah. So it's possible, but yeah. There's not one type of cancer that affects the entire population like COVID did. So But it's I think we're chipping away at it, sort of one cancer type at a time, and we're really only left with the really hard ones now.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long can a person survive with cancer?
You can live for the rest of your life with it if it's some cancers are controlled. So some types of blood cancer are really well controlled. Some types of skin cancer are really well controlled. So they're either with surgery or things like immunotherapy. We're starting to see that. We're starting to see patients that live long enough to die of something else. So even on the clinical trials I run for melanoma patients, some of them have died of other things because they've lived long enough with their melanoma.
Okay.
Yeah, yep.
Does medication play a role then in cancer and?
Yeah, yep. So we're trying to move to where it's an easy treatment, like an easy medication to have for the if you're living with it for the rest of your life. You don't want to have to come to hospital and sit in a chair and have an IV drip for the day for your treatment, which is what a lot of patients do at the moment. So we're trying to move to a system where we find treatments that you can take at home. So you just take your tablet in the morning, and that's all you need to do.
From all we've kind of talked about, Nikola, what would be the take-home from this interview for the people that are listening that you'd want them to remember the most?
It depends. That's hard too. I think we are in really exciting times. We're really optimistic that we're making huge progress at the moment, and we are in a situation where lots of cancers are very treatable and with nicer treatments than we've had in the past. So we are moving to where cancer is, a chronic disease that you live with rather than a disease that will kill you. So I think it's really exciting times. My other message is wear sunscreen. I'd be really happy to never see another sun-induced melanoma, but, that's not really going to be possible in our life. But, yeah, if anything, wear sunscreen and wear a hat. That's my take-home message.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, Nikola.
That's okay. Thank you.
My guest today was Professor Nikola Bowden from the University of Newcastle. Tune in next week where we discuss alcohol's effect on mental health with a clinical psychologist and researcher. And if you like this content, check out the Wellbeing podcast for more. Thank you for listening. I'm Jack Hodgins, and all of us at Wellbeing wish you well.